There we go. Thank you, YouTube commenter. Okay, let's try that again. Good morning. April 18th already, 2020. Patriots Lament, episode 451. We have started keeping track at the somewhat arbitrary number of 451. Thanks for the comments on the intro. Grace recommended that. It seems unusually pertinent to our time. One of the interesting themes that's come up this week, we had Becky Akers on Monday, and we've had a couple other. We've had Bob Wenzel on, and then we've talked about some other YouTubers and just people in the public eye in general. There's, David Icke's been talking about some stuff, Jeff Berwick, and then of course there's everybody else talking about things. One of the themes that's come up is that almost everybody on all different sides of, you could call it the coronavirus, but really I think it's more the dead end that materialist society is in, is the dead end. A lot of the arguments are about the dead end. And in particular in America, the arguments between the left and the right aren't about what's the way forward. They're about which one of them is right. And in many cases, neither one is, or each one has a piece. And I'm not saying that they need to compromise, maybe they just need to listen. And this has come up as a theme in with the COVID-19 response, right? There are the folks who say there's nothing going on at all. And for most of us, that actually is the case. Most of us aren't sick. Most of us would just love to get on with our lives. Most of us are not in a high-risk category for the flu or any disease. And so there's some truth there for sure. And why is everybody being subject to the same rules on this? And then on the other side, there are people who say, man, this is a brutal flu or virus for certain people in certain age and risk categories, which also appears to be true. And, a personal example of that, the church I go to is probably, the average age is probably 70. And most of the people, there's usually about 30 people on Sundays, and 15 of them are over 80. And so that congregation could be wiped out, and there's lots of groups of older people, and they're wonderful people. They have a lot of wisdom, and I learn a lot from them regularly. So for them, this is different than for somebody who's 20 or 30. And so the argument about which side is right misses the ability to communicate with each other and figure out what's right for each of us, and then how to negotiate a respectful relationship. Again, ignoring dead ends. The conversation about who is right doesn't go anywhere. It doesn't build the community and move everybody into the future. It's a dead end. It's if I can't go any further in this position, I'm going to get angry at the thing that says this road doesn't go any further. It's getting to the end of a dead end road and then arguing with the sign that's sitting there instead of going back and looking for a better way forward. Anyway, that theme has been emerging. There's a video that I wanted to run. We were going to run it last Saturday, and we just kind of ran out of time. And it is a Jordan Peterson video about ignored problems in our lives, about dragons. And it's a children's book, and the way that he opens it up is just phenomenal. The theme of it is basically that the small problems that we ignore over time become massive and end up overtaking our lives. And another theme of this time, of kind of being still, whether we want to be or not, is that a lot of us, so me in particular, and a lot of other people out there, are having to face issues sometimes in our homes or in our own lives or just in our heads. We have this quiet time with ourselves that have been eating us. And when we're busy, we get to ignore that stuff, but then it grows and it grows and it grows. And so this Jordan Peterson talk is about that. And this is a condensed version. There's like an hour-long version on YouTube. This is a condensed version. It's something like 30 minutes. So I'm going to pull it up and play it. And then we're going to have a little discussion about it. And Josh may be getting online in the next couple minutes. So we'll talk about it, and then we'll talk about it through the YouTube comments here. I'm very interested in your feedback on this. So here is Jordan Peterson.
Story. It's written for 4-year-old kids. But I want you to take a look at it for a moment from a different perspective and see if you can imagine exactly what it is that it's saying. There's no such thing as a dragon. Well, we all know that, right? A dragon is a fictitious creature. Reptilian, terrible, lives forever, breathes fire, hoards gold. Strange combination of attributes. Why would something terrible and ancient hold a treasure? Billy Bixby was rather surprised when he woke up one morning and found a dragon in his room. It was a small dragon about the size of a kitten. The dragon wagged its tail happily when Billy patted its head. It's interesting, in Chinese mythology, the dragon is a positive figure. In European mythology, the dragon is something to face in combat and destroy, or something to face in combat and build something out of the pieces left over from the dragon. Billy went downstairs to tell his mother. "There's no such thing as a dragon," said Billy's mother. And she said it like she meant it. Remember once my daughter had a nightmare. She was about 4. This was at the time when she first started to notice graffiti and litter. And both graffiti and litter bothered her. She couldn't understand the motivations behind the graffiti artist, and she didn't like the fact that there was litter cluttering up the world's order. And the reason she got sensitive to that as a child was because children are really, really dependent on order, right? And the reason for that is that their realm of competence is rather restricted. So they don't like to see things messed up. So little kids, for example, they're not happy with you if you play a game with them and then mess around with the rules of the game. They don't like that at all. They think that that's immoral activity to shake up the structure of the game. Well, anyways, while she was pondering all this, she came into our bedroom one night and said, "Dad, I had a nightmare." Now, we all know, right? Nightmares aren't real, just like dragons. Dreams aren't real. Of course, which raises the question of why in the world you'd bother having them 6 or 7 hours a night every single day of your life, and why they're a recognized feature of animal behavior all the way down to the amphibian level. She said, "I dreamt that there was a clear flowing stream, but in the stream there was all sorts of garbage, and it scared me and bothered me so much I woke up." So I told her, "Look, close your eyes and imagine the stream. It's full of garbage. What should you do about it?" She said, "Well, I should take the garbage out of the stream." I said, "All right, so picture the stream, picture yourself cleaning the garbage out of it." She calmed down and went back to sleep. Why? Well, because dreams concentrate on threat. We know that. They present threats to you, threats you haven't been able to deal with well. There's a part of your brain that tracks threats, and it's not really all that smart in some ways. All it does is say, "Look, here's a problem." And it's waiting for the rest of your brain to conjure up some solution to that problem. And if it doesn't conjure up a solution, then it just presents the problem over and over and over and over and over. So people who have post-traumatic stress disorder, for example, who've been really upset by their contact with something unexpected, dream about the same tragedy forever until they solve it. And they solve it by facing it and living it over and over, voluntarily. So you might think right off the bat from listening to that little story that suggesting to your 4-year-old daughter who's just had a nightmare that her fears aren't real and that the dream representation of them isn't real because it's not tangible like a table, might not really be the best approach to the problem. So you see, Billy, he's pretty much got it right off the bat, right? The dragon wagged its tail happily when Billy patted its head. Billy went downstairs to tell his mother. There's no such thing as a dragon, said Billy's mother, and she said it like she meant it. So there's a dragon in this house. Now the next thing you might wonder is, how often have you actually gone into a house where there's a dragon? My guess is if you don't take this particularly specifically and allow yourself to use your imagination and to think metaphorically for a moment, you've all encountered dozens of houses that were filled right to the rafters with various dragons, all of which were being studiously ignored by the people who inhabited the house. Billy went back to his room and began to dress. The dragon came close to Billy in a friendly manner and wagged its tail, but Billy didn't pat it. If there's no such thing as something, it's silly to pat it on the head. Billy washed his face and hands and went down to breakfast. The dragon went along. It was bigger now, almost the size of a dog. Billy sat down at the table. The dragon sat down on the table. This sort of thing was not usually permitted, but there wasn't much Billy's mother could do about it. She'd already said there was no such thing as a dragon. And if there's no such thing, you can't tell it to get down off the table. Sometimes I sit with friends of mine who have very young children to eat, say. And the children, 2 or 3 years old, don't sit at the table, they sit on the table, or they run around the table, or they run around the table and pull things off the table, or they run around the house and pull things off all the shelves in the house and keep their parents so busy chasing them around that they have no time whatsoever to interact as adults. Well, you have to wonder under those circumstances whether you're dealing with a child or a dragon, so to speak. And you also might wonder whether or not the dragon is large and unruly, precisely because the parents are completely unwilling to admit that it actually exists. Mother made some pancakes for Billy, but the dragon ate them all. Mother made some more, but the dragon ate those too. Mother kept making pancakes until she ran out of batter. Billy only got one of them, but he said that's all he really wanted anyway. One time, an acquaintance of ours in Boston brought their son over to be babysat at our house, and his nanny had just been in a car accident, so he was being shunted from house to house while his parents went off to work. And he didn't have very good reputation, this kid. He was about 4. And he came over to our house and with his mother in the morning, and she dropped him off and she said, well, he probably won't eat all day, but that's all right. And I thought, no, he's 4. If he doesn't eat all day, that's not all right, right? Because kids, if they don't eat, they're basically horrible, right? If they don't sleep and they don't eat, they're horrible. So it isn't all right that he doesn't eat. So then you think, well, maybe there's some sort of dragon associated with this child that happens to be interfering perhaps with his ability to eat. So I came back at noon. My wife had taken care of the children that day, and I walked in the house, and the other 4 or 5 kids that we had in the house were off playing, and this little kid was standing in the corner, like really isolated and looking, you know, upset fundamentally. So I went over and I poked him a bunch, because generally if you poke a kid a little bit, you know, well, they'll go like this, you know, they'll sort of back off, but sooner or later you can crack them and they'll smile and then they'll play. Not this kid, boy, there's no bloody way he's going to play with me. And that was that. Like, he'd already learned that adults should either be ignored or that they were trouble. And he wasn't going to let any adult into his little world. So there was absolutely a dragon associated with that little boy, and it was eating all his pancakes. Billy went upstairs to brush his teeth. Mother started clearing the table. The dragon, who was quite as big as Mother by this time, made himself comfortable on the hall rug and went to sleep. I really like this one. By the time Billy came back downstairs, the dragon had grown so much he filled the hall. Billy had to go around by way of the living room to get to where his mother was. I didn't know dragons grew so fast, said Billy. There's no such thing as a dragon, said Mother firmly. Cleaning the downstairs took Mother all morning. What with the dragon in the way and having to climb in and out of windows to get from room to room. So, you think back in your own experience when you've gone to a house where there's a dragon hiding underneath the living room rug and nobody's saying anything about it. And then you think, how long does it take to get something absolutely simple done in a house that's absolutely jammed to the rafters with unfinished business? Forever, right? Organizing people in a household like that to even do something as simple as go out for breakfast in the morning, or even perhaps to make a meal, is virtually impossible. Why? Well, because there's something going on in the household that has been studiously ignored for a very long time and has grown so large as a consequence that it occupies the whole domain. By noon, the dragon filled the house. Its head hung out the front door, its tail hung out the back door, and there wasn't a room in the house that didn't have some part of the dragon in it. When the dragon awoke from his nap, he was hungry. A bakery truck went by. The smell of fresh bread was more than the dragon could resist. He ran down the street after the bakery truck. The house went along, of course, like the shell on a snail. The mailman was just coming up the path with some mail for the Bixbys when their house rushed past him and headed down the street. He chased the Bixby's house for a few blocks, but he couldn't catch it. When Mr. Bixby came home for lunch, the first thing he noticed was that his house was gone. Luckily, one of the neighbors was able to tell him which way it went. That sort of thing happens to people not infrequently too, right? They're not really looking around much at what's going on, and they come home from work one day and their house is gone. And what does that mean? Well, maybe their children have become completely alienated from them, or maybe their wife has decided suddenly, but of course not so suddenly, to leave. Why? Well, according to this story, it's because something ignored was growing in the house. Mr. Bixby got in his car and went looking for the house. He studied all the houses as he drove along. Finally, he saw one that looked familiar. Billy and Mrs. Bixby were waving from an upstairs window. In the 1890s in India, when a house was being built, the local priest, equivalent to the priest, would come by to set the foundation stone. And when he set the foundation stone, he'd take a big spike and drove it into the ground. And the reason he drove it into the ground at the place where the foundation was going to be laid was to keep the great dragon that is underneath the earth firmly pinned down by its head so it couldn't move and shake the house to bits. And what does that mean? Well, it means the same thing that's meant in the New Testament when you're told not to build your house on a foundation of sand, right? It doesn't matter how good the house is or how well constructed it is or how rich it is. If the foundation is made out of sand, or if it rests on top of a dragon, there's nothing in that household that's ever going to be accomplished that's positive. And the wealthy display that the house might consist of is nothing but a sham. Mr. Bixby climbed over the dragon's head onto the porch roof and through the upstairs window. How did this happen? Mr. Bixby asked. It was the dragon, said Billy. There's no such thing, Mother started to say. There is a dragon, Billy insisted, a very big dragon. And Billy patted the dragon on the head. The dragon wagged its tail happily. Then, even faster than it had grown, the dragon started getting smaller. Soon it was kitten size again. I don't mind dragons this size, said Mother. Why did it have to grow so big? I'm not sure, said Billy, but I think it just wanted to be noticed.
There you guys go. What's the best way to grow a dragon? It's to ignore it. That was something I wanted to get into last week, like I said, but we ran out of time. And one of the reasons I wanted to get into that was there's a lot of agitation about kind of being stuck at home, and setting aside whether or not you're staying home because you think it's a good idea, which is I think what most people are doing, or whether you're home for other reasons, like there's no work, or you don't want to be fined or whatever. Regardless of the reason that you're stuck wherever you are, no matter where you're stuck, like I could think of all the places I could be stuck. I happen to be stuck here in Ontario. I could be at my folks' house in Anchorage, or I could be at my house in Fairbanks, or I could be with friends or whatever. But anywhere that I go, if I think about it, there's plenty to do in terms of dragons in those houses. Like if you think about your relationships, even the ones you have that are good, if they're really, really, really good, then you forget that you're even stuck somewhere because you're in this rich time of sharing with the people that you're with. And if they're not really, really good, it's usually because there's a dragon that's taken up the whole house, and you're having to dance around all of the stuff that's not right, that nobody wants to resolve because it's hard to resolve. And I think the situation right now with people being home most of the time is normal for human beings. It's abnormal for modernity. It's abnormal for our present culture. But it's normal for most of people across most of time. It's normal for Amish Hutterites and Old Order Mennonites. It's normal for a ton of people in places like India. And it forces you to clean up the house, basically, to make sure those dragons are shrinking. And I think there's actually plenty for us to do there. Like if we just took this time, let's say this goes for another 2 weeks to 3 months, like anywhere in there. I think, so 2 weeks to 12 weeks, I bet that if we really dedicated ourselves to improving what we can within our homes, so to speak, physically and within the family and friend structure of people that we're in touch with, I don't think we'd run out of work. I think there'd be plenty to do. And I think if we did that, if we spent our energy doing that instead of agitating, I think that when this is wrapped up, we would be in a lot better place than we would be otherwise. I don't know if there's a better thing that we could do with our time. And so that little Peterson video about what is, how do you grow a dragon and how do you shrink a dragon, that's been coming to mind a lot. As I've seen this, I have a couple friends who live on the other side of my neighborhood here, and they're both recovering alcoholics, and they've been encountering their dragons and working through them, and it's been harder for them, being out of work and just being kind of stuck at home than really anything else they've faced in the last 2 or 3 years since they started their recovery. And that's why they've confronted many of the bigger dragons, and now there's all the little ones. So anyway, I think there's a lot that we could do there in this time. And I think that as far as what would be useful for us on the other side, I think that's even better than, making correct investment decisions or something like that. So there you guys go.
On the other side, how do you keep it from coming back? Because we have, and sorry, I kind of jumped in late, so I didn't get, but I know it. So you're saying we have the opportunity to take care of some things now in the home, which is, you're right, absolutely. And then when we go back to normal life, it's got to go beyond just when we're stuck at home, because we can't go back to normal life and then let that thing pop back up, which is usually what happens. Priorities got to shift a little bit from, it's like we were talking about earlier, with things good things can come out of this. Beyond, like you said, just monetarily.
Yeah, that's totally the right question. Thanks for popping on. This is a fun, different, fluid format. I gave the show the title. What did I get? Arguing with Dead Ends. Arguing with Dead Ends. It was something that crossed my mind last night or today or something like that. And I had a call with a friend of mine who I hadn't spoken with in maybe a year and a half on Thursday. And this friend of mine works in the Bay Area for Apple and has been there off and on for basically the last 20 years and is a extremely senior software designer doing what they've always dreamed of. And we hadn't talked in a while. We talked on Thursday, and the theme of the talk was, this doesn't go anywhere. Who cares? And this being the pursuits of our modern era. And the point my friend made was, so like one of the things they're most proud of is they helped with a bunch of iPhone software. And iPhone is this really amazing integrated hardware software platform. It's a very, we all know what an iPhone looks like. It's a very good screen, a very fast processor, very good connectivity. The user interface is easy to use. It's quick, it's fluid, and it gives you access to all this information, to music, to movies, to all of this stuff. And my friend said, what does the iPhone do for its users? Ultimately, it delivers advertisements to their eyeballs. That's what this does ultimately. And what does it do for the investors and things like that? And they said ultimately it helps people who already have way more than enough stack up even more dollar bills. But what does it do for the problems in society? What does this do for homelessness?
Nada.
Or nope, I'm blanking out. There we go. What does it do for meaninglessness? What does this do for depression? What does it do for purpose? And it's like it's not even a drop in the bucket. And so the conversation that we had ended up being exactly the theme that you were talking about, Josh, which is, okay, we have this time to be still and to work on the stuff that's really important that we usually ignore because we're busy. But then when things get busy again, what do we do? And the theme of this conversation with my friend was, we should be really careful. We have this opportunity. We have an opportunity to clamor for things to get busy again, or we have an opportunity to really carefully step back in to doing what we need to do, to provide for our families and friends and stuff like that, while paying attention to our new priorities. Like, we have an opportunity to figure out what our priorities should be, and then as things go back to some semblance of normal, to very carefully say, okay, I need to work, I need to provide, and all these things, but I'm doing this in service of this, not the other way around.
Right.
Which I've been very bad about since, basically since I finished university. I kind of set out to prove that I'm worth something through work or whatever. And it's good. It's good to do a good job at your work and to be committed to it and to have it reflect, God's hand in your life. But it's just stuff. And if the stuff isn't serving the relationships, then it's all backwards.
Well, it's kind of so in the time that we're talking about, reflective while we're at home and taking care of those maybe relationships. It doesn't necessarily have to be relationships too. Maybe just personal things you need to work on. But using the cell phone analogy, do we have enough memory to work on those things and keep all the other stuff that took those things away from us in the first place? Or do we need to clean up our apps and delete a lot of them? We only have so much capacity, I think, for things, because we only have so much time, we only have so much energy and all these things. So to refocus on something, we really need to get rid of something else that took the focus off in the first place. So it's kind of a prioritization where it should be easy right now, though, shouldn't it? Because there's a lot of things that we were doing that we're not now. What things are not killing us that we're not doing right now? That we're taking away that time.
Yeah, it should be. It should be. And one of the cool things is that I've had this personal experience, and then a couple people have pointed this out to me from their own experience as well. The stuff that we do to distract us, like when things were normal, right, in the long ago, the stuff that we do to kill time, like I got 5 minutes, I'm going to check my phone or whatever, because we have an infinite amount of time to do that right now, it no longer works. Like social media doesn't work as a escape anymore, because if you spend all your time in the escape, it loses its effect. And so we're being forced to face those things, or we're being strongly invited to face those things. And I think some of the agitation, the social agitation, some of it I think is, hey, why are all these rules applying the same to everybody? And which is great, which is valid. But I think part of it too is actually the discomfort of facing some of those things. That usually there's enough things to move between that they can be avoided. But to your point of like removing the apps, Corey sent this talk by this Orthodox minister or Orthodox father, Stephen Freeman, and it is just phenomenal. The title of the talk is "God is Useless," and I'm going to put the link in the live chat right now. And the point of his talk is that in modernity, he calls modernity he refers to modernity as a culture, not as an era. So you could talk about a hedonist, right? And a hedonist has a set of values and a way of living. Or you could talk about a nihilist, right? Or nihilism, or you could talk about Christianity, or you could talk about Hinduism. And he says there's modernity, and modernity is its own belief system, and it just so happens to exist in this window of time. But there have been other windows of time with the same values, and modernity is sort of the cult of the new. He talks about it a little bit that way. So what is new and what is novel is what is good. And one of the metric of value, the figure of merit, by which all other things are judged in modernity, is usefulness. Is this useful? Everything is turned into a tool, including things like our relationships and charity and stuff like that. Like this, there's the religious idea of karma, which is an Eastern idea in Hinduism. But the way that the idea of karma is used in modernity is that the reason that you give is because it creates good vibes that will come back to you. It's charity reduced to utility. And almost everything is that way. Like even a lot of relationships and friendships, it's like, well, the reason that you want to be kind and loving to your children or in your marriage or to your friends is because then they'll reflect that back to you, which reduces the relationships to utility. And so Freeman says the reason there's no place for God in modernity is because God is useless. You can't use God as a tool to get more of something or to get what you want. You can't reduce God into this thing that you can then utilize. And anything that can't be utilized is judged to be superfluous, to be wasteful, to be useless. And he says, yeah, God isn't to be used. That's the point. And that's part of the reason that you can't take this culture of usefulness and of utility and inject God into it. The culture has to change. An example of this would be there are. I'm going to stay away from that. I'm going to stay away from name calling. So Freeman, he makes an example. Okay, he has an example. He says, "Do you know what the highest per capita state in the United States is for charitable giving, excepting Utah, outside of Utah? Do you know which one it is?"
No.
It's Alabama, which is just about the dirt poorest state in the union. And he says the reason why is because poor people give radical percentages of what they have to other people who have even less. He says it's just jaw dropping. They'll give their car to somebody, and yeah, their car's a clunker, but it's the only car they got. And he says if you're in need and you need money or something, go ask a poor person. It's like if you want something done, ask a busy person.
Right.
And he gets it. He kind of calls out Christians on that. And one of the things he says, he calls out the Greek Orthodox a little bit. He's the Greek church in America, and I have no dog in the fight, and he doesn't really like condemn them or anything. He just calls them out. In the Greek Orthodox Church, there's apparently been a big decrease in like generational membership in the church. And he was talking to a Greek Orthodox friend of his who was trying to figure out why. And Freeman said, "Oh, it's easy. You got wealthy. You guys immigrated to America and you started a bunch of restaurants and businesses and stuff and worked really hard. You have a bunch of money. And your kids are really well off now. They don't need God. They're well off.
Yeah.
Why would they be part of the church?" And he pointed that out in a way that really struck me. Because you're talking about getting rid of the apps, so to speak, in our life, and what that means. And it's pretty uncomfortable, I think, what that means. It's pretty uncomfortable. And then another theme of his talk was how much idle time. So he brought this up. He said before the Reformation, there were 7 weeks of non-work time. So the Reformation it added 7 weeks to the work year. Prussia, pre-Reformation, had almost 2 months more of leisure time than after the Reformation. And from his perspective, part of this was due to the Lutheran state involvement. It makes a more productive society, no question. So he spent a lot of his talk asking why is that good? And he talks about the Jubilee. Okay, he got into the Jubilee a lot, and he said, which is every 50 years in Jewish culture, all debts were forgiven and all ownership was reset. And so it didn't matter if you'd accumulated a lot or if you'd been a bum. I mean, it did matter because that set the course of your life. But the accumulated piles of stuff and the accumulated holes of debt were eliminated. Everything was reset. And he said, like, for his money, there's no bad way for, there are preferable and more preferable ways for that to happen. But when you see debt being canceled, like, hooray, awesome. And then in addition to that, he talked about leaving the land fallow, which was every 7th year you wouldn't plant, right? And so again, we live in this cult of the modern. And so as modernists, we go, oh yeah, well, they just didn't know about rotating crops. So, God told them to leave the land fallow for a year so that the soil could recover. And he says, and this is the point. Like, maybe that's true, maybe it isn't. Like, they weren't so dumb as we think. They probably did know about rotating crops. You couldn't plant the same crop for 6 years in a row anyway, so they were probably already rotating crops. The reason for the fallow year was that nobody did anything. Like, it forced a couple things. It forced everybody to stop what they were doing and to work on their community and their relationship with God, and confront all those dragons maybe. And it also forced everybody who had agreed to be part of those communities to prepare for that year, and to have just a tiny little bit of faith in God's provision for them. Like, we're going to go a year without planting anything, so we need to prepare for it. And then we also need to, have some faith that like it's going to rain enough that there will be berries and stuff like that. And that worked. They did that for thousands and thousands of years. But we interpret it from this weird modern standpoint, and we miss a bunch of it. So anyway, I highly recommend this talk. It's in the live chat there.
Yeah, they had 6 years, so they had to be fairly smart. I mean, they weren't dumb. They had 6 years to plan a whole year. I mean, I have a hard time planning tomorrow. Think about, let's just say it's 2020. So in 2027, David, we're not going to work or do anything like that. So we better be ready for it. I mean, that's pretty serious business. You don't wait till 2026 and go, crap. Hope my neighbor's been busy. It didn't work that way.
Yeah.
I was thinking too what you were talking about with utility of God's useless, in that that is kind of interesting, because he tells us to do things that don't seem to have any benefit to us. Like with bless those that persecute you. That doesn't seem to be very smart. It doesn't seem to be, I mean, what's the good of that? You should be fighting back or rawr, or at least whatever, but it's kind of interesting. He tells us things. I guess he commands us too. It's not like you could, man. There's commands of these things. And we think they're useless, or they don't sound like that, but they may have more meaning or utility than we think that they really do.
Yeah, and they might. That's very true. And their usefulness, if we wanted to use the figure of merit of usefulness, which we're kind of stuck in because that's our culture, a lot of the usefulness we'll never know about. Like, a lot of it exceeds stuff that happens beyond the time scale of our lifetime and things like that. We just can't even comprehend. So, and yet we can look back. Like the story of Joseph is great. Because he's on this journey, his brothers sell him into slavery, right? And he's on this bizarre journey in Egypt, which is sort of like, Egypt is sort of a metaphorical term for just being enslaved. And then he ends up saving them from this famine, which was wasn't this famine like 7 years or something? It was long.
Yeah, 7 years.
Like, that's crazy. I mean, people are losing their minds at 2 months here right now, right? 7 years, that's 84 months of famine. That's like 84 months of eating bread. Anyway, so he has the foresight, or he has, this word from God, and manages to actually convince these people who don't even believe in the same God that it'd be a good idea to save 7 years of grain for, a massive population. And they do. And he comes to this place of preeminence, and really, like, the icing on the cake, the crowning moment of the whole experience is this reconciliation with his brothers.
Yeah.
It's like all a story for how he reconciles with his brothers. And it's like, well, who would care about that? Like, if you become the prophet of the most powerful civilization on the planet, what would you care about reconciling with your brothers? But that was kind of the point of the whole experience. And so you can see the utility of all the stuff or the meaningfulness of all the stuff in the story. You can see, reading back on the story, there's no way you could see that while you're going through the story. And
no, did he have any clue that he was saving his nation?
Yeah, no way.
I mean, they saved the nation of Israel, because, like you said, it wasn't just Egypt. It was the entire area. The his father and brothers came to buy, from a faraway land, because, hey, we heard that Egypt's got so much. They'll even sell some to us, even though we, like you said, not the same God, not the same culture, not anything. They've had so much that they're kind of interesting that they're even willing to part ways with their goods to other people. But you're right.
God's
There's no way he could have saw that. There's no way he could have saw that.
And he wasn't trying to.
No, it kind of worked.
It worked out. And he did that, he was sold into captivity and continued to believe that he was where he should be and that he should pursue God's will and do the best that he could for the community that he found himself in as a slave in a foreign land.
Yeah.
After being betrayed by his own family. So, I mean, these examples are phenomenal, and there's a lot to complain about and to be upset about in the Western world right now. If you believe that your rights and freedoms are primarily physical, and if you believe they'll be respected by organizations that have no incentive to respect them, there's a lot to be upset about. Good thing Joseph didn't stew on that for too long.
Yeah.
And maybe we should be looking for some of those opportunities as well. I mean, because they're all over the place. Like, if I wanted to protest and be upset, I actually don't have time to do it right now. There are people who I know who need interaction, and they need like these other folks in my neighborhood. This couple that just got married. They need people in the community who can, help stabilize things to some extent. And I actually need interaction with them. It's super meaningful interacting with them. And between just a couple of those and other stuff that's come up as a result of the situation we find ourselves in, I don't have time to go protest. Like, there's too much engagement in the community here. And I am of the personal belief that the engagement with the community is going to be a lot longer lasting and meaningful than being angry at politicians who are largely doing what they're being asked to do.
Yeah. And the interaction, though, really, it shouldn't be. But for a lot of people, I'll throw myself into, it's harder. I mean, we kind of like to think, look at those heroes out there protesting. Rah, rah. It's not that hard to go hold a sign up. We've done it before. And not only is it not hard, it's a waste of time, a big waste of time. Doesn't really do anything. You might get 2 or 3 people go, yay. But it's a much better time spent if you're face-to-face interacting with someone. But that's a lot harder to do. It's a lot harder to engage in these things that you're talking about, relationship building, stuff like that. That requires actual work. And it also requires a little bit of some modesty, takes a little bit of patience. It takes a little bit of humbleness. And I think that's why we tend to not go that direction, because it's actually hard. We might think, well, going down, that's easy. I can do that anytime. But it's not so easy. It's a lot easier to protest or be mad about your perceived, like you said, your perceived rights, and be mad about a government that's doing what 85% of Americans want them to do. And doing exactly what we've always known that governments do. Where's the surprise here? Why are we surprised? But then all around us, outside in the real world, there's these other things that we've been neglecting forever that take real work. And I think that's why they don't get done, because it's actual real work to do those things. It's not easy, Dave. You're making it sound easy, and it's not.
No, it's extremely, you could say it's time consuming if you wanted to measure it in terms of usefulness. But it's cool because this is something that actually, that Natalie observed to me. We were doing some we've been doing some Zoom, like the church I go to, been doing some Zoom services, largely because like most of the congregation's in their 80s and they're actually like in the at-risk category. And it's been neat because the pastor has been, he and the worship leader will send out like a piano piece. Like they'll do a clap to synchronize it, and then she'll play the piano and they'll email it out. And then anybody who has an instrument or wants to sing does the same thing, records it, and sends it in. And then the pastor's making this big composite video. And then that goes out on Sunday, which is cool because I haven't played my instrument in church since, like, occasionally I'll do it at Christmas, but now it's every week. And so in doing that as a substitute, there's been some opportunity. But what Natalie observed, and then I sort of noticed, is that those meetings are exhausting. They're good, but they're exhausting. But when you meet in person with people, it's often regenerative or rejuvenating. And even though it takes time, and that's one of the things of, what is the, like if you measure by numbers, like how many minds you change, you might have to. If you meet with a friend of yours just to talk about life, you might spend 4 or 6 hours talking to them, and neither one of you change each other's minds, but you both feel better, like your relationship has grown. And it hasn't made a difference in the political direction of the nation or whatever, but it has made a difference in the cohesiveness of your community and in the relationship. Like if something really happens, like if this guy's kid gets sick or something, or if his wife leaves or dies, or if these things happen that are actual, real, significant events personally, then there's a network there, there's support, and it goes both ways, and that's way more useful than like they go and they fill in a little box on a piece of paper at the end of the year or something. So it really depends. Again, it depends on what your figure of merit is. But yeah, it takes a lot of time, and it's not useful. Like you said, it's not useful if you're playing the numbers game.
Yep. Well, we've talked about even relationships being in the time preference manner of not, worrying about what is your benefit, or are you going to reap immediately? And then that goes back to work. But if your time preference is thinking that this is worthwhile, it might be years, which takes even more work the longer it takes. But if you're looking down the road saying this is going to be worth it, I guess relationships, yeah, it's hard to, it's a risk too. It's a big risk factor because you don't know what the outcome's going to be, which should be part of the enjoyment of it, that you don't know exactly what the outcome's going to be over time. I mean, let's say you, me, and Mike, right? Mike's back here. In 2010 or 11, when we all first met, we certainly had no idea then the events that were going to happen to us up to now. Even personally, was it worth it? Are we glad that we knew each other then? That we took the time to have interpersonal, relationships with each other? You just don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
10 or 12 years later, you figure out, hey, that was worthwhile.
Mm-hmm. There are other people I met at the same time who I'm not in touch with anymore.
Absolutely. That's important too, though. That's kind of some people can be the apps that you delete.
Yeah, or they're passing through,
Right.
But yeah. So there's that fits into another theme that I just wanted to mention. I have to actually go in a couple minutes. But there's another theme I wanted to mention, which is I was watching a YouTube video, of course, this guy Ken Wheeler, and he's like a layperson who is a critic of any form of science that has contradictions in it, which is most science. And one of his beefs, he's read he's read a ton of ancient Greek, and he's like a student of Greek, and I think he speaks Russian and German as well. Anyway, he talked about waves. He was talking about waves and how energy moves. And he said one of the problems with science right now is it talks about waves as a thing. But a wave isn't a thing. It's what a thing does.
Mm-hmm.
I'm waving. That's what my hand is doing. And so he talks about there's this wave particle duality for people trying to explain how light works. And it's full of contradictions because waves aren't things. They're what things do. And particles, most like atoms, are primarily made of nothing. They're a field. They're an electric field, or they appear to be some sort of field. So they aren't really the majority of what they are. The insane majority is nothingness. So the particle thing doesn't work. And then the duality, there are no contradictions in nature. It can't self-contradict. And so the wave particle duality explanation of light is three incompatible terms. They're internally incompatible, glued together. So anyway, he talked about a wave is what something does. It's not what something is. And so I started thinking about truth. And one of the problems that we run into is we in our modern age, where we're trying to analyze everything as how useful it is to us, is we look for endpoints, right? Like we were talking about friends that may come through our lives. When we meet somebody, we go, is this guy worth knowing for the next 50 years? Instead of just like, here I am right now, and this is a human being, and we're going to have communion. We're going to interact with each other and share some spiritual connection. Because if you're really interacting with somebody, that's what's going on. When we tend to get stuck looking for the end point. And it's like, if you go to a movie, do you go to a movie to see the end? Is that why you go? Like the reason you go to a movie is to follow the story.
Yeah.
And so the way that truth is discussed libertarians are the worst at this, and modern people are bad at it in general, and I'm bad at it in general, is we talk about truth and facts. And truth and facts are not really related, and facts are tenuous. I mean, so people talk about scientific facts. There are no scientific facts. There are none. There's best current understanding. And the true pursuit, right. This is something my friend at Apple and I talked about. The true pursuit of science is driven by wonder and curiosity, not by knowledge. Science is not the pursuit of knowledge. It's the pursuit of wonder and curiosity. And it's always evolving. And like relationships, there are certain threads that you follow that just keep unfolding, and there are certain ones you follow that you learn from, and then they don't go anywhere, or they go away. They're gone. And that's okay. And so we talk about truth as a noun. Like we tend to, modern people, including us, we tend to talk about truth as a noun. What's the right thing for everybody here now? And it's funny because the thing that libertarians don't like politicians for is politicians prescribe one possible way of doing things for everybody. And libertarians say, no, it's wrong to make everybody do things one way, because there's only one way that things should be done, which is through my vision of markets, whatever flavor that is. And so anyway, so truth as a noun doesn't give you anywhere to go. As a noun, truth as a thing is once you get there, or once you think you get there, that's a dead end. And that's what I threw up as the title of the show, Arguing with Dead Ends. So when everybody in America in particular already knows the truth, whatever they think that is, all you can do is argue about your dead ends. Like my dead end sign's better than yours. It's bigger and shinier. It has more reflectors on it. Whereas if you think about truth as a verb, then it's this journey. It's this journey of growth. And it's this pursuit of curiosity and wonder, which is the same thing as the pursuit of God or God's will. It's like, boy, I wonder what tomorrow is going to bring. And I don't know. And that's why I wonder. And this is another time where we're stuck physically it's another invitation to think about all the stuff that maybe we don't know anything about, and to start new journeys. Like for me personally, I've been having the experience of being, I a lot of positions I've had on things, and things that I thought I knew have been called into question. We've been talking on a boring example, this whole modern monetary theory thing. What is money? You know, just as a really boring example, it turns out that basically nobody knows.
Yep.
And I mean, that's just a lame nuts and bolts one.
Right. Has the truth. Well, it is lame, but it's kind of fun because I think most people can relate to it. Is the truth of what you thought about money today different than it was 5 years ago, which was different 10 years ago? And is it different than what it was 15 years ago? I mean, even for listeners, because I know, some people, truth is set in stone. It's like you said, it's the dead end thing. I can't learn anymore because I know the truth. Well, I think most, if people are honest, everyone, if they can think back 10 years ago, pretty much most everyone thought they knew at least the degree of what the truth was. I know the truth. And pretty hard to say 10 years later that you don't know either more of that truth, which makes your first truth wrong, or to a degree wrong, or not full. Or for some people, what they thought was true 10 years ago, now they know a completely new truth. That wasn't true. But you have to have your mind opened up enough to be able to look at it. I mean, you can't.
Yeah, and uncomfortable times like this are great kind of can openers for a sealed mind.
Yeah. Yeah. Even in a difficult time. Difficult times.
Yeah. I have got to bounce, but you guys,
Okay.
Have at it.
What? I was just getting ready to take a nap while I listened to you.
I am peace now. Well, you got your education segment to do that we talked about earlier.
Oh,
so
that's right.
Yeah. The audience would be remiss. So I'm going to check out. I will catch you guys on Monday or Wednesday next week when we do our midweek show.
Yeah. Right on.
Cool.
Thanks, man.
Yep. See you guys.
See ya. Mike.
Yeah, I'm here.
Are you there?
Yeah.
All right. So I had something, and I'm glad you came on because this wouldn't work very good otherwise. Because I didn't go to college. Actually, I didn't really go to school. Anyways.
You're smarter than I am.
No. We know that's not true. I have it's kind of interesting, I think. So I was watching this gal on the boob tube, which is fun because I never used to watch news. Now I do, just to see what they're thinking. Mostly just to kind of prepare my mind what they're up to a little bit. Seeing what the enemies wrote. So this one education gal, I don't remember what her official title was, but she's basically saying, since school was stopped, for some schools it's been a month or more, and they're canceling schools all the way through the rest of the year, or at least the school year. She said we're going to see in the future a gap in education for people that are going into the work market, or the free market or whatever. And I was wondering, what do you think about that? So in the market, we're going to have this gap of people in college who, because, these people didn't learn anything. That's what she was saying. And in grade schools and high school, intermediate, these people didn't learn anything. So there's going to be a year's gap in the future of, remember back in 2020 when people were stupid, they didn't learn anything? And that's going to affect the rest of us in the future. What do you think about that?
It's only been, first of all, a couple of months. that they've been out of school.
Right.
So I mean, how much are they really losing there? And they supposedly some students were supposed to be doing online replacement education, and I read somewhere that very few of them are actually doing it. But as far as the education goes, what are they really missing? There's not a whole lot that they even cover in a couple of months, and what they do cover can be caught up in a fairly quick amount of time. But how much of that is even used in real life? Very little of it.
Well, and it's also kind of an arrogant way of thinking that, or a very, I'll change my mind there. It's a very small-minded way of thinking of what education is, isn't it? Because we're saying
Yes,
the only way to learn or educate or teach young skulls of mush, as Rush Limbaugh used to call them, is to be in this building being taught our values or our curriculum to your children by our teachers.
Yeah,
That's basically what she's saying. And outside of that, real life or being out, there's no way to be educated.
Right.
And
Correct.
I wonder if some of that too might be her fear or the education system in itself worried that people get a new mindset on what education is. We've talked about with people going home and homeschooling, there's a good possibility that a lot of those kids won't ever go back to a public school. Or their parents will change their minds about the whole thing. Like, you know what? We've had two people working. We don't really need it. Or even if, one of the parents is already at home, hey, we can actually do this. We were forced to. Now we know that we can. So I wonder if some of that's just fear from the education system trying to drum it up that, oh, looky here. At some point in the future, we're going to, I guess, basically just have a dead society for a year until that education gap catches up. I don't know.
Yeah, well, we talked about it when this first started. That this is great because now people will move to home education instead of sending their kids to state indoctrination camps. And there's also the possibility, well, actually, the likelihood that some of those kids are going to be better educated.
Yes.
It's like when I was 12, the same age as my son, my oldest son, I was teaching myself how to program on a Commodore VIC-20 after I got home from school being bored to death. So if I wanted so badly to be at home practicing my programming or down in the basement in my lab, and I learned a lot more from those activities than I did sitting in public schools.
Yep.
And so for kids who are interested in science, mathematics, other subjects, they're going to be better educated because now they have the time to do the things they want to learn the things that they want to. This is a great opportunity for them.
And I wonder with the amount of time. So I think if it was just like a week or two, it wouldn't have really taken hold as much as it possibly could now. Because, one of the things I've seen from parents that decide to homeschool is they try to be really rigorous in their, this is going to be at 8:00 we start this subject, at 8:30 we start this subject, at 9:45 we start this subject, then we take a 15-minute break, and then they try to bring the public education system into their home, which that's fine if they want to do that, but you don't have to. It's your time. You can spend it the way that you want it to. I know.
Yeah.
So I went all to school up to 3rd grade, and apparently I would get my work done and bug the other students and get in trouble all the time. I don't quite remember that as well as my mom might, but apparently. So I got pulled out of school and I was homeschooled. And I remember the first few years was like, it was kind of like that.
Yeah.
At 8:00 I did this subject, at 8:30 I did this subject, and at 9 I did this. And it's pretty stupid because I hated school anyways. I really did. And up to once I got into being a teenager, Well, go back. I used to get done by noon, though. I'd get all my subjects done by noon. And I've always thought since then, what the heck did we do in school for 7 hours?
Mm-hmm.
If I could get this done at home, the same amount of subjects in 3 hours or 4 hours at max, and it's usually less than 3 hours because we live next to a really cool stream and I'd go fishing every day.
Mm-hmm.
But then when I was a teenager, that even changed. I didn't do this subject then, or I'd do a bunch of one subject one day, or I wouldn't do anything. Especially the older I got, I was like, yeah, I don't want to do any of this stuff. And I would just focus on the stuff that interested me. And the rest of the time I was trying to get a job or working at my job. It's just we don't have to be stuck in this formal thing that the public education's told us that we have to do it. And I think maybe that we have enough time now. It's gone on long enough. Maybe people will figure that out. I don't know. But I certainly don't see this education gap coming up. That's just the dumbest thing I've ever heard.
Yeah.
If anything, like you said, people will be smarter.
Right. So, I mean, kids learn best when they're interested in something, and when they're just sitting there in the classroom bored, they're not learning. And so much of it seems to be having kids churn out papers and homework so they can, so that the schools can justify getting more money from the federal government. So it's like it's an indoctrination factory just to keep the money flowing. It's all about keeping the money flow going, rather than what the kid's actually interested in learning. And my view is that the kids will be better educated if they just don't have to go back. I think it's a great opportunity for people to learn how to connect with their kids again, because school in so many ways is just a babysitting arena for kids.
Yep.
So that people can go to work to pay the IRS, to keep the money flowing back to the schools, back to the police, back to the military. It's so from all these perspectives, the shutdown is kind of a good thing. It's a change in pace. It's a change in perception of their own lives. They can get out of the box a little bit and see an alternative way of living. And they may like it, and they may not go back.
Let's hope.
Yeah.
Fingers crossed. And how much of the education system, the things that we learn in school, is actually necessary anyways? Because I've always thought that education should kind of be, well, maybe it shouldn't have to. Education to a certain point comes out of necessity. So or things that we enjoy, like you were saying. So the thing that I remember when I was in school is history, because I loved history. So I remember all the stuff I read about history, and I probably because I keep up on it and I read it more and more. Math, I was good at it, but I didn't really care a bit about it and didn't use it at all until I really got into construction and had to use algebra and all that stuff for, cubic yardage and stuff like that. But it was necessary. I didn't take any typing classes, and it never bothered me until emails got really important. Well, I learned how to type on a keyboard because I need to do emails. So I always wondered, how much do we need to teach kids anyways, as far as book learning?
Yeah, it's kind of like assuming that they're too stupid to learn it themselves, isn't it?
Right. Or wasting their time learning stuff that they'll never use.
Yeah, and that's another problem, is that they running them from class periods. Let's see, when I was in high school, the last class periods were at 45 minutes. You have 45 minutes, and then the bell rings. You have 5 minutes to run to the next class. Another 45 minutes on a completely different subject. Bell rings. You run to another class, and how much can you learn when your mind is being constantly switched from one subject to the next? It's like you just got into focusing on the subject and the bell rings and you have to leave. It's hard to learn anything, and it's hard, and no one can until they're 18 and they go into college or they go into a job, and even going into college, you're not specializing. But teenagers and kids in elementary school, they can't learn how to specialize in anything. They can't learn to be an expert in anything because their job is to learn a little bit of everything to satisfy the test. So it may be something that actually retards people. They don't learn a specialty until they're in their mid-20s. Whereas people used to learn their specialty when they were 15. So it puts people it really puts people behind in their lives. So
a friend of mine just brought up an interesting point that probably needs to be discussed, especially in the current or modern America that we live in. Mm-hmm. You brought up a little bit about how education now is kind of a babysitting format. Mm-hmm. But we do live in a world where a lot of kids go to a public school and that's the only learning they get. We live in America that they get and this is something we have to, I guess, think about for alternative wise. We have to have alternatives. You can't just say trash this system and not offer anything back, because you have kids that don't have good home lives. They would never get homeschooled. Mm-hmm. Their parents don't take any time with them in the first place. In America, we have kids that the only time they get a full meal is when they go to a school. And think about how many school districts are giving out lunches because it's just a matter of fact, a lot of kids don't get a lunch. Mm-hmm. Or they don't get a breakfast, or they live in an abusive household. And the only care or time they get with a meaningful adult is at school, which, isn't probably not a lot, because if you have 33 kids in your school or in your class, you don't really have a lot of time to spend one-on-one time to really get to know a child. Mm-hmm. But it is a fact that a lot of the public school has taken the place of families, taking the place of a mom, it's taking the place of a dad. Mm-hmm. It's become kind of a third family member in a lot of homes.
Yeah, there's kind of a catch-22 there, in that there have always been bad parents, and the other side
before America.
Oh well, yeah. No, there's always been neglectful parents, abusive parents, and all that. Unfortunately, where a program comes in to say, hey, a state program comes in and says, we're going to step in and take care of those parenting jobs because of those neglectful parents. Well, then there's more parents that come along and say, well, hey, the state can take care of the kids for me, so I'll just advocate my responsibilities to them. And so supplying a way to get out of the responsibility has produced people who just throw the responsibility off onto the state. Yeah. And so then their kids learn that, oh, the state takes care of that responsibility, not me. So there's a catch-22 there. I know of a specific individual who is related to a friend of mine, who her idea was that, well, if I just get pregnant, I can get more welfare. So that's what she did.
Mhm.
And so what happens to this kid, this poor kid? The first kid was adopted out, and now I don't know what's going to happen with the second kid. I would assume the same thing. And so the state ends up being a producer of children who can't be cared for.
Hmm.
A producer of potential abuse. So,
Well, and like you said,
uh-huh.
this has been a problem with humanity since day one, obviously. And in the past, at least since its inception, there was the Christian church took care of a lot of those things. It was the support group, right?
Right.
And it's kind of done the same thing that a lot of parents have done. It's abdicated its job to care, we're commanded over and over and over, care for the fatherless, the widow, the poor. It's kind of like when we were talking about essential services I think it was last Monday, and whether the church was actually an essential anymore. What if the church goes down to the local governing board to say, hey, we need to be open because we're an essential service? Okay, why? Why are you an essential service? It's certainly not because, well, we're taking care of these kids who are abused at home that aren't getting enough to eat. And not all of them, but generally it's true. The church isn't an essential service anymore. That was their job. It used to be their job, and they've advocated that because the state's done it.
Yeah,
And that's not the way it should be.
no, that's totally correct. And it wouldn't be that hard for the church to be an essential service again, as far as anyone's concerned. I had an uncle. He was great guy. He died in '94 in a plane crash, but he was the pastor of our church in Anchorage at the time. And the food banks are considered essential, right? Well, all of his free time, well, not all of it, but a very significant amount of his free time was spent going to Costco, buying stuff, and repackaging it so he could take it to the food bank or just deliver it to people who needed it personally. So if the church was doing that, like he was doing that, the church could easily be considered an essential service.
Well, then I guess you got to ask yourself, what is the church, though, too? I mean, he's being the church, isn't he?
Right. That's
we've complained about churches in a building. It's the people. Well, people are individuals, and we're all individuals.
Yeah, when the church's focus becomes the building, the church kind of dies.
Yeah.
You're just there to service the building, like you were talking about last week. And I've seen that happen. So it's and that was in a small church. I'm accustomed to small churches. I've never been to a mega church, and even the small churches are like that. When I was a kid, I remember my mom and her friends working really hard on the pews. They were building the church at the time, and they were working on these pews. They got them used, and they were sanding them, and they worked for weeks on this and varnishing them and all that. And it was a lot of work, but eventually they ended up selling the pews after several years because every week they'd have to pick the pews up and move them because the church was renting the building out to a private school during the week. So they just sold the pews and went over to folding metal chairs. And my mom was so mad about that when it happened. But the pews were becoming just a source of grief to have to move them constantly. And they were always in the way. They did a beautiful job on it, and it was kind of a testament to their love of the church. But at the same time, the product kind of became an obstacle. So So it's easy to see how a church building can be the object of the worship rather than the activities that the church is supposed to be engaged in.
Definitely. Yeah. So obviously we're not, public schools aren't going to end tomorrow. They're not going to end the end of the year. I mean, there'll be at some point, sometime, schools will reopen, kids will go back to school. I'm just hopeful for the most part that parents that are able, that see that they're able to, will take advantage of it and keep their kids at home. I mean,
right. Well, we can also,
many of them that can do it.
yeah. We can also draw a parallel with the schools that we did as we were talking about with the church, where the school building itself becomes the object of the education system. When they, like in Anchorage, when they were building, I think it was Diamond High, they were building a new school there when I was in Anchorage. And I went in, I worked as a substitute teacher on the side while I was flying. And I went in there one day, and it was my first day there, and it was just a humongous room, humongous empty room, cafeteria, commons area, with this. It was gorgeous. What was the point of it? I thought kids were supposed to go learn there. It's just not supposed to be some gigantic architectural monument, but actually it is, because a certain percentage of the budget has to be spent on art. Right, and so yeah, it's like they build the buildings as temples to the state, to the state education system, and the kids are just shuttled from room to room, trying to push out papers to satisfy the testing requirements so that schools can continue to get their funding. So the same thing has happened in the education system as has happened in the churches. And what we have going on now is, in my opinion, a good thing, because now education can come back in its raw form, and it's so easy anyway. I mean, you have things like the Ron Paul curriculum or Khan Academy, and he just sit them down for an hour at a time. They can do their algebra lesson or whatever lesson that they happen to be on, and then they can go skiing or go swimming or whatever. They're not stuck in the building, or they can just keep, if they're really interested, they can go for 6 hours if they want.
Yep.
And they can be allowed to find the subject that really inspires them. Like I said before, I was always irritated when I had to go to school and I couldn't study the things I wanted to study. Probably like you, you would have rather read history than some of the other subjects you had to do.
Yeah. Well, I'd rather just go fishing, anything than, yeah. Well, and we know, I think the biggest problem too with it, even so-called conservatives get caught up in the whole thing with the, remember when Bush did his, what was that thing called? No Child Left Behind.
Mm-hmm.
Right. It was just another centrally planned school edict from the federal government, where one guy, basically Bush, said that, well, I know how every school needs to run. And I know how every school needs to test. I know how and I don't know. I'm just bringing that up because it's funny how conservatives are supposed to be against central planning, but it's okay if it's in the school system. And school systems or schooling or education with kids, that should be, out of everything we talk about, that should probably be the least centrally planned thing, because no no two individuals are alike. Well, no two kids are
Right.
definitely not alike. Each one of them has different learning ability. Each one of them has different needs. They all have different interests. And I think that's just the biggest problem with the schools. I mean, there's of course, the we like to call them re-education camps and education camps and all these types of things. And there is part of that because they are, to a certain point, brainwashing them to be good little servants of corporate America and to the state. But the biggest problem with it is just the central planning of it all. There's no individualism in it.
No, and that's especially bad for kids who get ignored at home. Then they have no individual identity at home, no love at home, and then they get shuttled off to school and they have no individuality there.
So what's an alternative there? I mean, can you say, well, first of all, you have to know your neighbors or talk to them a little bit. So can you, alternatively to the public school, can you say, if you know a kid that's in that situation, volunteer to, it's not really homeschool if they're not on their own, I guess, but volunteer to homeschool them at your home?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. If
I guess you can't right now because it's social distancing.
yeah, social distancing. I don't know. There might be. I don't know if there's laws or rules on that regarding having to get a permit from the state for acting as a private school or any of that. I guess one-on-one you could do it as a tutor, but if you have more than a certain number of kids, I don't know. I really don't know. But as far as tutoring kids on a subject, you can catch them up fairly quickly. I used to help out my aunt's second grade special ed classroom, teaching kids how to read, and it was you could take a kid who didn't know how to read at all, and in a couple of months you could get them up to their grade level. They tended to learn fairly quickly. It's just that no one was willing to give them the one-on-one time that they needed. And when they get that, they actually absorb it pretty quickly. So it's not that difficult to do.
Well, even the term grade level, is kind of a centrally planned thing. All kids that are 10 years old need to be in, what grade is that? Sorry. Guess I should think before I talk. All kids who are 10 years old should be in 5th grade. I think it's 5th grade. I don't know. And so their education level should be a 5th grade level if they're 10 years old. Well, who says? Some kids that are 10 years old, and I'm not going to say that they're brilliant or smarter than their counterparts, but some kids excel at different ages on different subjects or different parts of their life, where you might have a kid that can read at a quote unquote 11th grade level when he's 10, knows 9th grade level math when he's in the 5th grade, and another kid that can't do jack squat in school. But doesn't mean he's dumb, might just mean he's not ready for it, because he might also be the dumb kid, quote, calling him dumb just for example. The dumb kid might be really good at making fish flies. And he might be able to show you how to catch the big lunker out in the middle of the pond. He might be the kid that knows how to sew the fishing nets when he's commercial fishing with his dad, or when he's doing the subsistence fishing or something like that. It's just, I hate that we box kids. It's the worst thing in the world, box a kid in.
Yeah, pretty much every kid's going to be the dumb kid in some subject.
Right.
Because they're either, they're not adapted for it, or, they're not interested in it. And there were subjects I was the dumb kid in. The dumb subjects I was the smart kid in. So I think that's just true for just about everyone.
I seen Layla saying that in Fairbanks there are rules against homeschooling other people's kids, other than like teaching Spanish classes. But yeah, that probably makes sense. They don't like competition.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and who are you? How are you smart enough to educate a child, especially if it's not yours, which is just more stupidity.
Right.
And I do know homeschool families get together to do things like, you know, teach different, you know, one parent out of several might be good at another teaching a foreign language, so all the kids will go to their house for this, and then they'll go to another house for a science project. Or apparently you can't just have them over and go through schooling. What do you think about the whole deal with unschooling or non-schooling? I think that's kind of fun.
Would that be
Where you don't actually even crack a curriculum book.
Oh, okay.
Just let the kid kind of you kind of follow the kid's interest.
Yeah. I'm not opposed to it. I mean, if that's you know, what they see as fit to do, then that's fine. They're going to learn the things that they need to learn to do the things that they want to do. Period.
Right, and being against it too would kind of make you a tyrant, wouldn't it? If it's not your kid.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. You know, my kids might you know, they do the Khan Academy, but I kind of let my oldest son just decide what subject he likes the best, what he's going to focus on, and he does that. And I keep track of what he's doing, and if I think he's falling behind on one thing, I'll have him focus on that a little more. So I guess that's kind of a half unschooling method, but
Sure.
But yeah, you know, we don't even do a super structured method. You know, we don't say get up at 7, at 8 o'clock you need to be on this subject, and at 9 you're on this subject. We don't do that stuff.
Right.
So
yeah, we'd never have either. Mostly because it's hard enough to have the parents be on a schedule and make your kids be on a schedule too. Sheesh. It'd be kind of nice if, you know, you kind of brought it up, but, you know, apprenticeships where kids focused on singular things of interest. You know, back in the day, you didn't necessarily have a choice on what your parents decide you're going to be apprenticed for. And some of it then was partially to do with necessity too, because, you know, you're 14 years old, mom and dad are kind of tired of feeding you, and they're having a hard enough time feeding the other 10 kids. So you get to be an apprentice for someone where they take care of you and learn you up a oops, we're getting some weirdness here. What was it? With apprenticeship. Anyways, we all know what those are. Where you get to learn a specific skill set. Mike, I think, is gone. Well, shoot. Well, we can't take calls or anything because Dave has that set up on his end. I don't really have anything else to talk about because I'm tired. Unless somebody has something in the comment section that they wanted to bring up. But as far as me, I'm about done. Hope everyone's doing good. Don't really know what's going on with the, you know, I'll just blab a little bit now. We had the Trumpster says he wants government to open back up. It's kind of fun when he said that he was the one and he could make things open back up when he wanted to. Oh, Mike's back, but he can't get on because David has to include him in. Shoot. Anyways, it was fun to watch Trump backtrack. You know, and the interesting part of it was he didn't actually say, yeah, I realize that I don't have the power to open or close the economy. It's up to the governors. He said that I'm going to allow the governors to decide what's in the state's best interest. And that was kind of an interesting thing with it was kind of an interesting thing. I keep cutting out now too. I think the state's tired of us talking. If you don't know, there's kind of an interesting thing with Trump doing that, where there were some libertarian types that, 10th Amendment, Trump, you don't have the right to open or close the economy. That's states' rights. And all right, I got to jump back to Layla here. I don't necessarily agree that reading at 12 is harder than learning at 6, because I know kids like I knew a guy who had a private school, and my brother, for instance, he had a hard time learning to read and didn't really care about any subjects in school. And I believe he told my mom, don't worry about any of this stuff till he's older, about 9 or 10. Just let him be a kid. And she did that. And then when he was a little bit older, he decided he was interested because there were some books that he wanted to know how to read. And he picked it up like that. So, I mean, it might be, I mean, there are different abilities at different ages, obviously, that are easier than later in age, but it does seem like adults have a harder time learning how to read than a 6-year-old, I'm sure. Yeah. So I get that point. That makes sense. Anyways, going back to with this president. There was kind of a fun little headbanging thing there, headbutting with different libertarians who were saying that, you know, states' rights, 10th Amendment, governors should be able to decide when to open up the country, when not to. And technically, according to the 10th Amendment, they're right. But I kind of disagree on the fact that freedom being a little bit more important than the Constitution, which might be strange to some people because they equate the two. In that situation, I'd say, oh, well, about the 10th Amendment, if the president says he would rather, and the president is just a person, he would rather the economy open, I agree with him. Now, on the other hand, if the president was saying the economy has to stay closed and governors were saying, no, we need to open them, I would be screaming, yes, 10th Amendment, 10th Amendment. The governors have the right over the president in this matter. So, anyways, I just thought that was interesting this week, so I thought I'd bring it up. And it might sound a little bit inconsistent, like, wow, you just pick and choose. And yeah, I kind of do pick and choose. And I pick and choose on what advances freedom. And in this case, letting people get back to their lives advances freedom more so than, and is more important than whatever the 10th Amendment says. So, anyways, Mike can't get back on here. And our internet keeps cutting in and out for some reason. So I'm going to call it a day too. Thanks for watching. We'll try to get this thing back rolling again Monday on a regular time, which I think is 12:30 or 1. We've talked about doing the Saturday show, not 3 hours anymore, because we're doing hour and a half 3 days a week also. But appreciate everyone participating and obviously telling other people about the show. We have the show we did with Becky Akers, been very popular. Lots and lots of people have watched that and commented emails about it and stuff. So, if you do have something you'd like to discuss in this while we're hunkered down, as they say in Anchorage, remember you can email us. You can email me at joshua@patriotslament.com or david@patriotslament.com or Michael, I believe, just michael@patriotslament.com. So you can email us there just to give some suggestions on maybe some subjects you'd like to talk about, because it may get boring just saying we've had this many deaths and this many cases and the stock market's doing this and that. But at the same time, it's kind of fun to follow. Yeah. Lately, pointed out some governors are insisting they'll keep the states closed until August. That'll be really interesting because it seems like the general consensus, majority consensus, is at least till the end of June now, which boggles my mind. Think that way. It's nice that they know the future, though, too. Must be nice. Anyhow, please like, share, subscribe. We'll probably see you guys on Monday. If something amazing happens, make sure you have your alerts on. The little bell when you subscribe, hit that bell. You'll know when we're coming on. Yeah, Dave's part's always better. All right, I gotta go. You guys take care, stay safe, and we'll see you Monday. Thanks. Except I don't know how to turn this off.
Am I on again?
Oh, shoot. Somebody put Mike back in.
Dave must be back there.
Oh. I was just cutting out, Mike.
Okay. Well, I guess we'll be back.
Except Monday. I don't know how to. I got to figure out how to get out of here. I don't know how to turn it off. I think I got to log in. So the way this thing works, folks, is that one of us hosts the stream. Well, that person also has to be the person that cuts the stream. And they have to be the person to bring you back in, right?
Well,
David, come back.
Apparently someone brought me back, so
24 hours of Patriots Lament. I'm ready. I can talk forever, actually.
You gonna do one of those money bomb marathons?
If I could get the cash money Ron Paul did, heck yeah.
Yeah.
That brings back some fun times, huh?
What was that? $2 million he got for that? I think.
Yeah, it was a record at the time.
Yeah,
it's pretty cool. Yeah.
We're gonna try that. Split about $670,000 a piece.
Wouldn't be too bad.
Yeah.
Until I get this figured out, we'll just blab here. So, suggested reading, Mike. I think a fun set of books that folks might like to read is by C.S. Lewis, and it's called The Space Trilogy. It's amazing. It's way before its time, I think. And it's just, can't really give too much of it without giving too much of it away. But C.S. Lewis Space Trilogy, it's 3 books. It's fantastic. One Well, I thought it was. Well, anyone that I've given it to so far thought it was really, really well done. Well, obviously well done, C.S. Lewis, but I thought it was worth reading. It's a mind bender, which I kind of like books like that. If we're going to be locked down for the next 10 months, I highly suggest Conceived in Liberty, volumes 1 through 5. And I say 10 months because that's how long it takes to read volumes 1 through 5.
I just got my copy of Left 5, or just I just downloaded it, but I don't have a physical
Oh,
copy
did you?
yet. Yeah.
I was kind of drooling to get the thing, and I still haven't finished reading it. And then,
Oh, okay.
before I was like, as soon as I get it, I'm going to blast through it. And I got it, and I didn't. That's kind of the way it goes.
Yeah. Well, especially with electronic books, because they sit in your iPad and you forget that they're there.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I've done that for. Yeah.
Yeah. That's the thing. One of the things I don't like about ebooks. You just forget you have them. So.
Yeah, I actually had a set of plans for a job I'm doing in my book section on my phone.
Mm-hmm.
And I was looking for them the other day. So I have to go back out there and do some work on it. And saw some of the... I saw a couple books on there I'd totally forgotten about. I was like, dang, I got to get back and read those.
Yeah.
Oh, Layla. No, I read Conceived in Liberty Zombie Mode. I plowed through it. It was awesome. It was too much. But you're right. It's much better to go zombie mode because you actually need to go back and forth through it so you remember it better.
Yeah, you kind of have to read it twice.
Mm-hmm.
Because he refers back to previous chapters multiple times, and you got to remember what he said and back then. And
I've been through it 3 times.
Mm-hmm.
And I still don't remember everything.
Yeah.
Oh, we did a whole series on it too. That's pretty good.
Yeah. I still have the notes from that. I'll have to dig them out sometime.
I have the downloads for it somewhere. Yeah. Well, sure wish I knew how to get out of here. I'm going to try something.
Well, did Dave add me back?
He had to have, right? I'm going to log into StreamYard and see if that works. Just when I thought we were almost barely professional. Here we go. We're not. Oh, I am logged in. Then how come I can't shut it off? Stop. Having issues? Yes, I am having issues. How can we help? How the crap do I turn this off? Oops, sorry.
I think I know why. I sent a message out on the chat that I was back, and I think he saw that.
I know we could just get off of it, but I don't know if YouTube will quit streaming it. Yeah, Dave. You get back on the show here and shut this baby off. Come on, Mike. Fill some time.
Well, getting back to the reading thing, and Dave will shut us off right in the middle of my sentence, right? I had a cousin who he was. I put this on the chat. But he was 5 when he started public school. He was really smart, and he ended up the high school that he ended up going to was drug infested, basically, and so he dropped out at 15 and went straight to college to study mechanics, and he was really good at it. He was 23 when his aunt taught him how to read. he graduated college with a degree in mechanics and didn't even know how to read. And then finally learned at 23, and then he went on to do aerospace engineering. But you can learn how to read it at any age, and you can also learn how to learn without even knowing how to read, apparently. So just something to throw out there. There's lots of different routes to learning, and lots of different, and you can learn it at any age.
Yeah. Well, we should, right?
Mm-hmm. I think one of the reasons it's easier for kids to learn stuff is because they don't have the distractions of life piled on top of them. They actually have time to sit down and study what they need to.
Right. They're not paying bills and getting food on the table and washing the cars and
right
all those important things. Yeah.
So
yeah. Plus, their mind's kind of empty as far as actual knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
So they usually eat it up. Well, different kids at different times in their life, depending on their development.
Mm-hmm.
That's just why I don't like central planning. Doesn't work for anything. Doesn't work for economies. It doesn't work for kids.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't work for lockdowns. Doesn't work for viruses. It's kind of like this. I don't know if this irritates you as much as this whole thing that you hear on everyone says it on the radio, on TV, and we're all in this together. It makes me want to freaking freak out. I can't stand that.
When did I join your prison club?
Yeah, it's such a lie too, and I hope it bugs everyone now that I said it, because every single one of us we're taking it differently. We're being affected by it differently. So how can we all be in it together? Mm-hmm. I mean, some people get to go to work. Some people don't get to go to work. So how are they in it together? Mm-hmm. We've seen, it's a fact that, suicides have risen. Well, they obviously didn't feel like they were together with anyone. Mm-hmm. If they were killing themselves. So I don't know. That just drives me nuts just to hear him say that. And it's supposed to make us feel better. Like, we're all suffering the same, blah, blah, blah. And we're not. And I, even say suffering, what does that even mean? Mm-hmm. I lost, and about it, and I won't really go into detail because it's not really for much public consumption, but my company lost a pretty good contract because of this whole thing that would have been very nice to have for several years. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, I don't feel like I'm suffering from that. Right? It's disappointing. It sucks. Yeah. I mean, it really sucks, folks. Mm-hmm. It sucks. But I don't see it as suffering. I mean, I definitely haven't thought about, well, I'm going to off myself because I didn't get this this contract got canceled is basically what happened. So yeah, we're all in it together, as in we all live, Americans we all live on the earth, but outside of that, there's 330 million people in America. So there's 330 million reactions and thoughts and effects that it's having. So that's why I can't stand that little all in it together.
Yeah. Here's a good point. Politicians are non-essential.
That's irritating too. I don't know if you saw, I don't remember what Joker state it was. I don't mean the state itself, but the statist governor was signing some little law saying that, people caught not social distancing, $1,000 fine. Mm-hmm. Right? So there's 11 politicians crammed in this little tiny room, and they're shoulder to shoulder like this, with their big, goofy, jackass smiles because they're going to fine people for being closer than 6 feet from each other. It's like, you guys are less than 2 inches from each other. What are you doing? So there's $11,000 fine. Let's start with them. Lead by example.
Right.
But we're all in this together.
So we could. I wonder how would you be able to issue the fine?
I don't know.
Set up a way to issue the fine. At least put it on a ballot, right?
Let us vote on it. So we're all in it together. I don't know. That just irritates the crap out of me.
Mm-hmm.
As does all of this, actually. Yeah, we got our Buddha here. Politicians and presidents are non-essential. It's so true. But like we were talking about earlier, we're at 85 to 90% of the American public is behind all this I'll call it in my opinion, it's nonsense.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of hard to buck that system.
Mm-hmm. Well,
at least, go ahead.
I was going to say the whole idea that someone can declare that a certain business is non-essential. It should make you question if you even want to go into business. If you go into business, when are they going to declare you not essential and shut you down?
Well, it certainly should make you question people that think that way.
Mm-hmm.
That just drives me nuts too.
Mm-hmm.
Especially when politicians do it. Central planners, commies.
Mm-hmm. Because apparently the pot stores up there are essential, right?
Oh yeah, not only essential. I think you can get roadside delivery now.
Yeah.
Won't be long. They'll be doing they'll be delivering at your door.
I mean, how is that? I mean, it was like
people that smoke pot are gonna love that. They can get their tea, they can get their pizza and their pot at the same time.
Just 3 or 4 years ago, they were illegal. Now they're essential. How does that work?
What if you owned a pizza pot store? Or you did both. You give them the munchies, then you give them the munchies.
Right.
It's a $1 billion idea.
But let's see what I guess gyms are non-essential, so they're shut down, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it's anything that will keep people in their houses. That's essential.
Right. I think the biggest is, and things that promote the continuity of government.
Mm-hmm. Or that raise taxes for the state.
Yeah. If you're deemed essential to the war state, I know that you will get a little certificate that allows you to do whatever you want, basically.
Yeah. So if you produce tax money or spend tax money, you're essential, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because is that the only tax money that Alaska has left? Because they don't have oil now, and they don't have tourism now since Princess shut down. So now all they have is taxes for pot stores.
Well, and they have bringing it back to Alaska, 3 more villages. I don't remember if they're villages or corporations now. Have signed on with Dillingham to close the commercial fishing season.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And, we talked about that earlier, and a good friend of mine brought that up to me. And he spent a lot of time in villages. And I used to, when I first moved up here, the first 6 years, or 5 or 6 years we were here, we spent a lot of time in villages in Bristol Bay. And he did have a good point. A lot of folks out there are on welfare already, so they don't, it won't affect them as much as maybe I was making it out to be. And then a lot of people in these different villages and areas out in, Bristol Bay and whatnot, they don't really like the outsiders coming in and catching their fish in the first place. Because I remember that going out to Natnik commercial fishing, most of the people that I met were, well, I'd say 90% of them were out-of-staters, and 50% of them were Californians. They were actual fishermen, which that was kind of interesting because they're actually fishermen from the San Francisco Bay Area. And a lot of the cannery workers, especially down in Igigik, they were Filipino. So, he kind of brought up, there's a little bit of resentment with that because they kind of see that their resources being taken from them. And, they live out there, so they do have, which I guess, first right to it or something. I don't know. But, or they, at least they have the mindset that they should have that. And a lot of people just don't like to, they don't like to work.
Right.
Lately said something about mining there. So the two major mines here in Fairbanks now have reported COVID-19, not necessarily breakouts, but the one over Fort Knox got their first one. I saw yesterday, I think, or 2 days. It was reported yesterday. First case of coronavirus infections. I don't remember what I was doing at the time, so I didn't read up on the whole story. Maybe if someone knows, but I was going to say they can call in. Wrong studio. So I don't know what they're going to do as far as that. I doubt that they're going to close the mine. But then, what's the other one out by where you used to live, Mike? The Salch area.
Pogo?
Pogo mine. Yeah. Pogo had one a couple weeks ago, and I haven't really heard what they're doing there. So we'll see. Of course, big mines aren't the only mines in Alaska. Just Fairbanks, Pogo and Fort Knox is pretty big because a lot of people work at those two mines, especially Fort Knox. I know a lot of people that work there. And anyone that's been on the Steese Highway when they do shift change knows there are a lot of people that work up there. But you still have your smaller miners and mining outfits that'll they'll get sick and they'll just keep working. It's interesting. If someone just looking for stuff to read or listen to, Doug Casey's kind of fun to listen to right now. He had an interesting, I think he was on Tom Woods. Maybe that's where I listened to it. He had some interesting things to say about the whole thing, the economy. And part of it was how, the coronavirus was just kind of and he kind of made it sound just a small needle that pricked the economic situation. Because he was basically saying the economic situation is ready to falter anyways. And COVID-19 just kind of pushed it over. And he is putting all of his UFTA, all his extra cash money into gold. He said, I'm going to be either really rich, he said, or I'm going to be really poor. He said, because I've gone all out. And as far as miners, it was kind of funny. He said, gold miners are going to be printing their own money, is the words that he said. I thought that was kind of funny. I don't know if that's necessarily completely true, but
yeah.
Casey's been right before, though.
Right.
Yeah. And with the tourism, it wasn't just Princess. What's the other tour company? There's two of them. They both said they're not. I believe they both said they're not coming back this year at all. So. And
doesn't it? The cruises account for was about 3/4 of the tourists that come into Alaska.
I don't know. I wouldn't doubt it. But even with tourism, with the Canadian American border being closed to travel right now, I'm sure tourists aren't essential travelers.
Oh, that's yeah.
Unless you're an Alaskan that relies on the tour industry.
Right. Yeah.
Which we all do. It's kind of with, markets, it's the free markets. We look at different industries and go, oh, well, the tourism industry is going to take a hit. Glad I'm not in tourism. But we're all interconnected from a certain point of view as far as the market's concerned. Because if this sector of the market disappears, well, the money that they make, the income that they get, that doesn't just go into a hole somewhere and disappear.
Mm-hmm.
It's spent in the rest of the market that Alaska has. And I think more of, the oil industry, because, it's not just the dudes hauling freight up to Prudhoe Bay that are out of a job right now, or that offload rail cars. The trucking service companies, the companies that service trucks, companies that sell parts, companies that sell fuel, oils, lubricants, all those kind of things, they get hit from that too. And they use that money to spend, obviously. I'm just pointing out the obvious, but sometimes people don't think about the obvious things. So, you take our biggest three, like oil, tourism, and fishing, which probably is the big ones. Well, and it's not even commercial fishing. The sport fishing, our wonderful leaders have said that they're going to allow us to sport fish. And they're going to allow us to subsistence fish, like the Copper River fish. But no outsiders can come in. Right? So you think about the guys that make a living on, the guys that have the 6-packs that want to take out their clients to fish.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't mean a 6-pack of beer, it's a license. It's not going to happen. It's just like my wife's cousin. He's a guide, and spring bear hunt is his biggest moneymaker. He fishes. He hunts down in the peninsula for spring brown bear, and he can't have any of his clients come in now.
Mm. Yeah, see, Layla just posted it's 1.5 million out of 2 million. So it's 3/4 of the tourists coming in on the cruises, and then I think it was So it's and then Princess said, that's 3,500 temporary workers that they're not going to be training this year to come up here. So, I would imagine that Alyeska village on the way down to Anchorage is going to be completely closed down. It's like winter time.
I think it was the Department of Commerce. I think it was them. They have basically they see Alaska as the most seriously economically hit per capita. Because we're so reliant on those 4 things. Mm-hmm. We don't produce squat. We don't produce anything, do we?
In large part thanks to the Jones Act, right?
I guess we produce a lot of weed, but we can't export it.
That's about all that's left.
We can't all grow weed. Dang.
Half the population will be growing it, the other half will be smoking it.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah.
What an economy.
So here's what I think is going to actually happen. And Buddha might find this interesting. Well, it's speculation on my part, but the federal government and Trump is really, Democrats for a long time have been pushing for a infrastructure bill to the tune of about $1 trillion. And Trump, being an election year, has upped that by another $1 trillion. And there will be another bailout, another round of bailouts for folks. The talk now is a 2,000, and this is crazy. This is just crazy. This is another reason why Bernie Sanders dropped out of the race, because there's nothing left for him to run on. Is there's a bill right now to give every American $2,000 a month for up to a year.
Wow.
6 months to a year, but or until the pandemic has subsided, which I believe that's code word for 18 months.
Yeah, that's what they keep talking
Because the pandemic isn't going to subside supposedly until there's a vaccine, you know, because we all know that flu vaccines work so well. Yeah. So you have your guaranteed income that socialists have been pawning for forever. So that's coming. The small businesses wiped out the small business loans and the PPP protection plan, you know, paycheck protection plans wiped out, all that stuff. So they're going to have to reload that, because from what I was reading, they didn't even get close to the amount of people that applied. The money was gone way before they could get funds. And I actually don't know anyone. Well, actually, I don't know anyone that's applied. I was going to say anyone that's got the money. So I guess that's true too. But I've heard from folks that know people that have applied for some of that stuff. They don't know anyone that has actually received any of those funds. And my mind is thinking that it's because a lot of the funds went to major corporations that didn't really need a bailout. But that's part of the reason why they got rid of the part of the act where the Federal Reserve and the government had to keep track of where the money went and how much. They kind of got rid of that for probably good reason. They don't want us to know where the money got. So yeah, that check on the 15th, that was the personal one, correct? The $1,200, because I know a lot of people got that, but I was thinking more of the small business loans. I don't know anyone that's gotten that. Okay, yep, that's what he's talking about. Yeah. Then Layla's asking, how do we pay for that later? 90% tax for anyone. We're not gonna pay it back. So this is something interesting. I think we could see with this new MMT bowl that everyone's jumping on. It's starting to. So I'm like an MMTer now. I'm like, hey, government, print as much as you freaking want. Spend as much as you want. Yay! Quit taxing me. Right? Just let them go nuts. I say let them print $100 trillion.
And these checks are tax free, right?
Yeah. Yeah. The personal checks that went out to everyone, those don't count against income, and neither will the guaranteed income checks. I'm just going to call them guaranteed income checks because that's what they are.
Yeah.
But if you look at that with this, per person, $2,000 a month with the extra that the federal government's guaranteeing for unemployment, that's $1,000 a week. So you're looking at $6,000 a month. When you count in the state unemployment, $6,000 a month, isn't that like $72,000 a year to do jack crap, to do nothing, do absolutely nothing? So if you're a family of 4 and your wife claims unemployment, you're talking some serious cash. $148,000 or $144,000. And then if you have 2 kids, that's an extra $1,000 a month. Serious cash. So who the heck's going to want to go to work?
Well, no one. And it sounds great for right now. But like you said, who's going to want to go to work? You can get more money just sitting around doing nothing but collecting government checks than you can if you went to school and got a 4-year degree and got a job as an engineer or something else, or a doctor or whatever. You can make more money just sitting at home now. So who's going to go?
Well, not only that,
no one.
Not only that, they tax you if
Yeah,
you work.
and then they tax you, right? They don't punish you for sitting at home just collecting government money. They punish you for actually going to work and supporting the economy and doing something useful. Uh, and so, you know, the the economic the strength of a nation's economy, the, the the viability of its currency is based on um, the perception of that economy by the rest of the world. I mean, the U.S. has been a strong economy because the world has looked at it as the most productive economy in the world. This is where people produce things. They go to work. They produce things. Um, no one can beat Americans, right? Well, now Americans just gonna be sitting at home. So, what confidence is there going to be in in the American economy in the future? There's no reason to have any. So this will
But
last for a couple of years, and it'll just start falling apart.
but how long can it last if the dollar is still being used as the petrodollar?
Yeah, well, still being used as a reserve currency, and
Yeah.
that's in a way it's kind of the saving grace because you have the euro going down, and the Europeans are going to be trying to save what they have by going into dollars, and the dollar is going to be what everyone runs to, but no one's going to be producing anything. So everyone's just piling on the dollar, trying to save what they have, just hoarding. They're just hoarding. It's the same thing that happened at the end of the Roman Empire. People just started hoarding coins and putting them in the ground, and then society fell apart, and eventually you had the feudal societies come about a couple hundred years later. But it's
Well,
kind
if no one's
it's the same
producing,
event. It's the same. Yeah, it's
if
the
no
same
one's
event.
producing, what are you going to spend the money on if no one's making anything?
That's the thing. Yeah, that's a good question. What does Bill Gates think he's going to spend all his money on when he's just shut down the entire economy and no one's producing anything for him to buy?
Okay, I don't think he cares. I'm glad you brought that up. He doesn't care. He already has $100 billion, right?
Right.
I think gotta pull my conspiracy hat back on here. So I think this has a lot more to do with global warming than we're giving it credit for. I think this has a lot to do with global warming.
This is exactly what they wanted to do, and they couldn't do it with their fake global warming stuff. So they do it with
How do you get people
flu.
to quit using their cars? Well, if they don't need to go anywhere, if they don't have anything to go buy or purchase, they don't need to drive their car. If you don't have manufacturing, you don't have all the pollution that's going in here. If you think about what Prince Charles said in January, right before all this really kind of broke out, at was it the G12 or one of those things, where he said that, we need a new economy. We need a new economy. And this economy can't be the same consumption economy that we have now. And his whole point of it was because of global warming. He said that his whole life's goal basically is to fight global warming. Same thing that Bill Gates has talked about. Global warming is the most important thing. Global warming is the most important thing. So this really could be all about changing the economy to fight global warming, which we know is a farce too. It's a real farce. And it doesn't really have anything to do with actual warming of the globe. What they're talking about with the new economy is a new centrally planned, back to that phrase, new centrally planned economy.
Yeah.
Where they decide what's produced. Because the people that decide that they're going to produce, they'll get paid a little bit more than the ones who get to stay home. But only certain things will be produced. I think that's one of the reasons why we're hearing the new terms of essential services. I think all this stuff is to brainwash us, or maybe that's too harsh. It's to condition us to accept the new normal. Essential services. Well, we don't need this, and this. You stay home. Do you realize that your job's not essential? these people are. We're going to pay them a little bit more because they're essential to the well-being of all humanity. You stay home and we'll pay you to stay there. But look, we're going to save our world. We're going to save all the old people from coronavirus. We're going to save the polar bears. We're going to save the South Pole ice pack. And we're going to have complete, total control of everyone.
Yeah.
But don't worry, folks. They never get it. They never will get complete, total control of everyone.
Well, and they ultimately they published what their desire is, and that is to kill off all but 500 million people.
Yep.
You know, they want to get rid of most of the world's population, and it's I mean, really, they just want a modern version of Maoist China, of communism.
Yeah.
And we're just seeing the beginnings of the famine that they're going to use to kill people off.
I hope not. That'll stink.
Yeah.
But
at least for the people in the
I do think while we're focusing on COVID, we need to think of other things that they've that they brought up and other crusades they've been on. That's the word I was looking for. Some of their other crusades they've been looking at. Just kind of keep in the back of your mind how they could all tie together. Kind of interesting.
Yeah.
So, Mike, Layla says something here about pretending money has value. It has value. I don't think that meets reality. If we're not producing, the bottom falls out of that. So, unfortunately, though, pretending money has value really is the only thing, like with the Federal Reserve note, that gives it value. It has no intrinsic value. It's not backed by anything. I mean, even, some of the MMTers and different people, Keynesian model types are writing now and admitting that the dollar doesn't have any value outside of what people think its value is. And part of that has to do with, like we said, oil, being the petrodollar, having to use that. But the other part is that people just look at America as the mighty American. It'll survive everything because we won World War II. That's basically why.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
But it's all faith-based, right? The belief, the value of our dollar is a faith-based thing. It's a religion.
Yeah. What is money? Everyone has a different opinion, but money is just a unit of account, and it's just a number to represent what you've produced or what you've possessed, and it's what has intrinsic value, though. I mean, just really nothing really has intrinsic value. Although I guess the closest you could come to having intrinsic value might be food. I mean, if you went down to if things broke down to a road warrior society, food would be what had value. So maybe that'll even be money. I'll go buy a gallon of gasoline or 10 gallons of gasoline with a can of freeze-dried strawberries or something. So, maybe freeze-dried goods will be the next currency for us. But let's see. Layla says that China will make things, and China's going to be the producer. That's the next economic capital of the world. The U.S. has had its day, and it's coming to an end. So it'll be interesting to see how that unfolds.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, and if America's not producing anything, then eventually its currency isn't going to be viewed as being worth anything either. But that's eventually. Are you still there, Josh? No, I guess that's it. I think I've lost Josh. So I'm going to cut out here. I'll see you guys Monday.